I recently checked with the publisher, and Innovation Tactics, which is a deck of cards packed with methods, has recently been bought by more than 30,000 people. So 30,000 innovators out there, very proud of that. I'm going to share 3 little methods from the deck in my talk today, which is, as Afrit said, about sneaking agility back into Agile. That's kind of the theme of the talk. Another theme is a little bit about vision and perhaps the dark side of visions. Because I think in the industry, in design industry, we've been sold a kind of a vision over the last decade or so, which is that we can be powerful, we can have a seat at the table, we can solve all the problems and we can make everything better. And we look around now, I talk with lots of designers, and I don't feel we're making much progress towards that vision. And if anything, we're going backwards. We're going away from that vision. And we're told things that are simplistic platitudes, like we'll just understand the business, speak the language of business and understand the objectives. And yet I talk to designers and they say they ask about the objectives and the objectives are vague and unclear and keep changing. Get back in Figma and make some screens for the developers. They're told, understand the metrics, help your team smash the KPIs and the OKRs. And they ask, well, what are the KPIs? What are the OKRs? And they're told, well, we're a month into the quarter and we haven't decided them yet. We haven't decided the OKRs for this quarter yet. Get back in Figma and smash out some screens for the developers. And they're told, create a compelling vision to inspire your organization. But they're overloaded with work. They've got to do this, that, and the other. They've got changing objectives. Everything's up in the air all the time. They don't know where they're supposed to be going or what they're supposed to be doing. And if they do make time to craft a compelling vision, they're told that's unrealistic. Get back in Figma. Smash out some screens for the developers. And by creating this compelling future vision of a wonderful world, what we really do is create a massive gap, a painful gap, because the reality of today has nothing to do with that future vision. And by always looking at that vision and creating these simplistic platitudes, we disempower people from doing what they can do today. And that's the other big topic of my talk, is about how to act and adapt with where you are today. I'm going to start, well, let's see, we've got clicker working, clicker, hello clicker. There we go. So this is a rough outline. We're going to start a little bit with what goes wrong in Agile. I'm not going to wade too deep into the holy wars, just a quick story. We're going to look at how research might come to the rescue. Then we're going to look at how I was wrong. These are my favourite sorts of talks, when somebody tells you they were wrong. And then I'm going to share 3 of these little methods. My hope is you can try these methods when you're back at your desk on Monday. And finally, we'll wrap up and talk about what that means for you to be able to act and adapt. So without further ado, here's a story of many a project. This is the default position. If we build it, they will come. We've got an idea. We've got a plan. We're going to build it. We're going to launch it. And we're going to win. That's how we start, isn't it? Here's how that goes. We're a good Agile team, so we do a load of sprints. We sprint. Wonderful. We're making progress, aren't we? Except as we work, things start to be a little bit harder than we thought. Some stuff is a bit more complicated. There are some surprises along the way. And we also start to get a little bit unsure about whether this thing is going to be as good as we thought it was going to be in the first place. We have to cram some more stuff in. We have to take some other stuff out. There's a delay. And we start getting delayed. Because there was a delay, well, now the team changes. Somebody's got to go off because they've got to do something else over there. Some other people leave. Even worse, maybe we get people added to the team to help us speed up. What this means is more delay. We delay more and we're struggling, but finally we get it over the line, we launch, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. But did we actually meet the objective? Did it work? Most of the time, we don't know. Show of hands, does this sound familiar? Yeah, sadly true. And here's the even worse truth. This is the reality in most cases. Most of those projects are those little skulls and very few are the little tooting horn. I don't even know what that is. But the numbers I've heard for this vary, but somewhere between 80 to 95% of projects, like products and features, fail in the market. That's bad, isn't it? Maybe research can come to the rescue. So I joined, this was a startup I joined 8-9 years ago. They were in the fintech space, and I built out a continuous discovery whole practice there and A/B testing experimentation program. It was really cool. We brought in customers and users every week, and we tested our stuff with them, we interviewed with them, we understood their lives, and really started to raise the profile of research in the organisation. I'll say more about the A/B testing later, the experimentation. And it was great. Thought, great, research is getting that seat at the table. And so when a project started, this was a specific project they'd seen an opportunity in a car loans type product, a very specific car loans product, which there was a very good, clear market position for. It seemed to be an underserved need in the market. So they spooled up a team and started building it. And being a good research-driven team, they had a user researcher. It wasn't me, but someone else. They headed off to go and find some users so they could test the flow, make sure it was really good, make sure it was smooth, that everyone could understand it, that it was working well. And the researcher came back after 2 weeks and said to the team, do you know what? I actually can't find anyone who is a customer for the product that we're building. Do you think that's a problem? And the team said, oh, just go and find anyone. So he went away and found some people who were adjacent. They were near enough. They had the right sort of loan, even though they weren't really in the market for this. And he tested the flow. The flow was fine, made a lot of sense. But everyone at the end of the session said, but I'd never want this. This is not something that anyone wants. Don't you understand? This is how this product works, and you're trying to tell me to do something different. I don't want that. Here's some things that we do want. The researcher came back to the team and said, hey, what we found is nobody wants this product. There are 5 other things that they do want. Fantastic. So obviously at this point, the team down tools, thought about it again, started again, and built one of those 5 things that the customers wanted. No, of course not. They carried on, and they built the thing. It was delayed. They expected it to take 3 months. It took 6 months. Finally, they shipped it. In the 3 months after they shipped it, 1 person applied for that finance, and they got rejected. After those 3 months, finally, the senior leadership said, we're going to have to shut this down. We'll close the project down. At least we've learned something. If only we could have known earlier. I was like, oh my God. At this same organisation, I got a bit of a reckoning. And in an anonymous survey, a product manager said, the trouble with research is that it tells us either that we're building the wrong thing or that we're building the thing wrong. And I thought, that's the trouble with research? That's the point of research. Do you like setting fire to money? It took me a little while, but I realized I was wrong. I was wrong in 3 ways, and I'm going to share those now. The first way I was wrong, I thought success is about the right thing done right. That makes sense, doesn't it? Of course, we've got to build the right thing. We've got to build it right. Well, no, actually, when you look around, and I had to look around and realize every successful thing out there is imperfect, even quite bad in lots of ways. Nothing is right in every way possible. And we're back at that thing of setting an impossible vision, a vision of perfection, and then only seeing the gap between the reality we're dealing with, the mess and the imperfections, and that perfect utopia that we wish we could be in. So instead, act and adapt from where you are until just enough things are just not wrong enough. This is coming back to where we are today, the reality that we have to deal with, and making those changes. Second, where I was wrong, I thought we could teach everyone to be evidence-based. I did lunch and learns about different sorts of cognitive bias. I taught people to be researchers. I trained a load of researchers at this company. Some of it was good. Some of them went on to be really successful. I'm really happy about that. But I tried to teach the executives and my other colleagues how to be skeptical, how to use critical thinking, how to do experimentation properly with proper statistical significance and all this sort of stuff. As it turns out, no, evidence doesn't change minds, at least not on its own. The irony is it took me, the evidence that evidence doesn't change minds is pretty clear, and it took me a very long time to accept that evidence. The reality is we only see what we're expecting to see. Just think back to that car loans project. The evidence was clear very early on. It didn't change anyone's mind, at least not on its own. So instead, let's adapt to how humans really make decisions. We're going to have a little bit more on that later. Finally, the way I was wrong, I thought that I must evangelize the proper process. Process. Trust the process. If we do the process right, we'll get some good stuff out of the end, right? Well, actually, no. If you build a hill to die on, you'll probably die on it. There was me evangelizing, doing all of this stuff right. I was there on a hill with my flag saying, look, there's a better way. And everyone was just walking around the hill, ignoring me and getting on with what they wanted to do anyway. So instead, don't start with what you want to do. Adapt to what people want to do. There's an irony here that when we are designers and researchers, we're very good at adapting to our users. We understand that when our users tell us how they make decisions and what they want to do, they're probably not fully aware of how they're making decisions. They're probably not telling us the whole truth because they can't. But then we come into the office and we think that our colleagues, when they share their goals and their objectives and their KPIs and say that that's how they make decisions, that that's actually how they're doing it. It's not. There's a quote from a guy called Jonathan Corman that I love, which is, we think that we're doing evidence-based decision making, whereas what we're really doing is decision-based evidence making. That's where we have to start. And it's back to that thing, people see what they expect to see. So I'm going to share 3 methods for innovation that sneak that agility back into Agile. These are methods that are based on the reality of what it's actually like working in messy companies with messy political teams and all of the, you don't have the data, you don't have the ability to persuade people, all of that stuff. You know this is true. And it's not pretending that we can make that perfect vision come true today. So the first method is called the time machine. This one is about where should we start. Really, it's a prioritization method, and it helps us to prepare for a world where we can adapt if we need to, because we're doing the work, all the same work, just in a different order. I'm going to use a slightly silly example, but it's totally relevant to work as well. I'm going to say that we're planning Christmas, and that I want to plan a wonderful Christmas with my family. Now, because I'm me, I'm doing it in Miro. So I've got all my family on Zoom and in Miro together, just like all of us do, right? We all hang out in Miro with our family. And I set the scene. I say we're going to take a trip in a time machine. You can use the DeLorean or the TARDIS or any time machine of your choice. Who's up for the H.G. Wells original classic? Anyway, we're going to get in the time machine and we're going to take a trip in time to just after Christmas. So we're going to go about mid-January and we're going to look back at the Christmas that just happened. I'm going to say, great, the mist clears. We step out of the machine, the mist clears, and you're looking back and it was the best Christmas we've ever had. You loved it. It was just amazing in every way. And I get everybody to write down on the Post-its why it was so good. When they're looking back, what did they love about that Christmas? Why was it so brilliant? While they're busy writing, I'm slipping some green Post-its over to the right-hand side of the diagram. Once everyone's had a few minutes to write down their best ever Christmas, I then jumble them all up and we start to do something that's familiar to anyone who's done these sorts of workshops, a bit of affinity mapping, which is grouping things together when they're a bit like each other. And we start to group these together and we stack them above a green sticky. So we end up with a bunch of different columns of stuff that's similar. And we give each of those green stickies a name to give the column a theme. So this is what that column is about, broadly. Great. So now we've got a bunch of hopes for how Christmas might work. And on there, we've got some people are interested in the party, some people are interested in hanging out with their cats, some people are looking forward to the great food, some to the movies. Some of the things everybody's into, they're very, very common. Some of the things are a bit more outliers. There's only one person who really cares about the cats, for instance. Now we get back in the time machine. We think we're coming back to the present day, but no, something goes wrong. And we end up flipped into a parallel universe. And we're the same time in mid-January, but this time we step out of the machine, the mist clears, and we realise we've just had the worst Christmas ever. It was so bad, we wish we'd never even heard of Christmas. Now we ask, okay, what went wrong? Why was this so terrible? Same exercise again. People write down their topics, things that they really hated. And then we do the same grouping. We go, and we end up with another load of columns underneath the orange stickies. And we get another load of themes. Now we have bad food. We ran out of money. Nobody came to our party. These are some of the themes that we've got that people are afraid of. What we've got now are those hidden fears that people have. Now, if we ask people looking forward to Christmas, what are you worried about? Then nobody's going to want to say we're worried about the food because they're afraid of hurting the cook's feelings. But if we go to the future and we look back and we say, it's a game now, let's make this a fun thing where we're looking back, we know it's failed, it's been awful. What are all the things that went wrong? How can it be so bad? Then we're making it safe, we're making it playful to share those things that are really revealing what we're actually afraid of. Now we're going to join those up, and we find that some of them pair up really nicely. Some of them are obvious. The opposite of great food is bad food. The opposite of calm is stress. But others of them, we can take the absence of a good thing as a bad thing, or the presence of a bad thing as a good, no, the absence of a bad thing as a good thing. Nearly got there. So we end up with loads of different pairs. The one on the end is a classic example that people often share. Aliens, or in the good Christmas, no aliens. Depends on how much you like aliens, I suppose. But yeah, what we're seeing there is people's hidden hopes and fears. And they're all matched up. The final thing we're going to do, before I go further, this is a bit like that scene in Back to the Future, part 2 this is, where Doc is explaining the parallel timelines. We've got 1985 where Biff's in charge, and we've got 1985 where Biff's not in charge. And the real trick we're doing when we take this time machine is we're back at that join point, and we want to know which of these futures are we heading to so that we can do something about it today if we need to. So the next thing we do is we take a vote. We take a vote based on, when we read through those orange stickies, the orange bad universe things, which of those is the most scary to you? Which feels intuitively like it's quite likely to happen and would be bad as well? And we get a vote. And often you get quite a clear standout. Sometimes you get a mess all over the place. You handle those in different ways. In this case, we can see the biggest fear is that nobody came to our party. Another fear is that the food is bad. And another is that we ran out of money. Now, here we're talking about a silly Christmas example, but these are very similar to the sorts of things we worry about when we're designing things with our team. The bad food is a quality issue. Can we do the thing right? Can we make this high enough quality that it's going to be acceptable? The nobody came to our party is a desirability issue. Are we doing the right thing here? Do people want to come and use our product, or are we inviting people to something they don't want to be at? And finally, the no money, the running out of money, is a viability issue. Are we going to run out of resources to do this? How are we going to trade off the different ways that we could invest our time and effort? And here's where we can do different things about those. So, for instance, for the cooking, we could prototype some of that cooking. We could decide, well, this weekend, let's do a test run. Let's make some of the food and see, can we actually make it acceptable? Can we learn how to do this well so that we can be more confident that when we get there, we will make a good Christmas dinner? For the party, we could send out invitations and ask people to RSVP so we get a bit of a signal of, are people going to come, or do we need to worry? And we could discuss trade-offs when it comes to the money. Where do we want to put our resources? Do we want to spend more on the presents? Do we want to invest more in the food? Do we want to invest more in balloons for the party? How are we going to decide these things? Now, these are things which are really important to product teams, to product design teams, companies of all sorts. And yet they're also things that I often see teams just not really discussing, not getting out in the open. These remain hidden, and we all assume that everybody shares our hopes and fears. Everybody shares our objectives. Everybody believes that the stated objective that we're told is the thing is actually what we're doing. It's not. So what we're finding with the time machine is hidden hopes and fears. And what we're doing here is agreeing where we need to be adaptive. Where is the place where we are most afraid? And we're going to go towards that fear so that we can learn, do we need to be afraid? There's two things that can happen here. Either we find out, actually, yeah, we suck at cooking. We can't cook a good dinner. Let's hire a caterer and solve that problem. Let's adapt and do it differently. Or we find out, oh, actually, no, we smashed it. We made an amazing dinner. We can confidently do that when it comes to the day. We don't need to worry about that anymore. And that's great. And we've done a trial run. We've learned a lot. Fantastic. When do you do this? This is when you're prioritizing work or debating about a big initiative. How are we going to get this done? What matters about this thing? How do you do this? This is how you slip it in. So this is actually my twist on Gary Klein's method called a pre-mortem. And this has been seen in Harvard Business Review. So you can say, let's do that thing from Harvard Business Review. It's going to help us to predict and manage risk. Now, stakeholders love predicting and managing things. They hate innovating and experimenting. So this only takes 30 to 40 minutes. And you can really smash through them that quickly. And it will help you predict and manage risk. It will also open the door for the possibility of research and experimentation in places that otherwise won't do it. I've literally seen this happen in stubborn founders' eyes when doing this exercise is the first time they've ever allowed themselves to consciously consider that their brilliant idea might not work out. And it opens the door. They start to think, oh, we better actually find out whether we need to worry about that. And this has been used by other people as well. Time machine exercise with 50 people today. They seem to enjoy it. Feedback mentioned a positive experience with the exercises, just in case you needed more proof. So next is pivot triggers. Anyone heard of pivot triggers? No. This is my best known method, so that's looking well. This is more about when should we adapt. So we've understood where to adapt. Now we're going to ask when. What are the signals we need to see that tell us, yeah, now we better adapt? For example, for that Christmas invitation situation, we've decided how many RSVPs are going to be just enough for us to feel confident that we should go ahead with the party. We want to pick a number and we say, well, maybe like 10 say yes out of 50 invites. We'll send out 50. If 10 people say yeah, we're good. We can debate about that. We can have a discussion about what signal would be enough for us to feel confident. Sometimes we might say, no, we need 20 before it's worth it. Other people might say, no, we're having the party, whatever. Doesn't matter if nobody replies, we're doing that party. And so we write this in this form. On November 24th, we'll change plans if fewer than 10 guests have replied yes when we send 50 invitations and ask for RSVPs. We could do this for technical internal things as well. So for example, when we do the trial run of our dinner, on Sunday, we'll pivot if we score the meal less than 6 out of 10 when we make a trial run roast dinner. Great, these are things that we can now do, and we've set ourselves a bar that makes us hold ourselves to account when we don't meet that bar. And we're really asking the question, what signals do we need to see today to feel confident that it's worth investing more tomorrow? They all look at this format. This is kind of a pivot trigger statement. On date in the future, which ideally is very soon, we'll pivot if we see not enough signal when we probe with a small, rough version of the big idea. Pretty simple to do. Here's a real example from business though. At the end of this week, we'll pivot if fewer than 6 out of 10 customers say yes when we offer them free Calendly integration to help them schedule calls. This is a real example. It seemed like an absolute no-brainer that all of the customers would really, really value Calendly. They were struggling to book appointments. So we sent out an email to 10 customers. Any guesses on how many people said yes? 0. 0 customers were interested. 1, when we twisted their arm, we did the integration, they never touched it. So this feels bad, doesn't it? It's a horrible thing to learn, but this saved that team 3 months of farting around with integrations that they could then use to do something that was valuable. Here's another example. In 2 weeks, we'll pivot if we see fewer than 8 out of 32 customers opening the rough version of the dashboard we sent to them. We made a rough version, and I mean rough, it was hideous. It was in Google Sheets, and we made this by hand, by hook and by crook, just munging data together and sent it out to 32 customers. We got back that 20 customers opened this thing, and several of them got back to us and said, hey, can you send this to my colleagues as well? And so we ended up getting more than 32 customers out of 32. So sometimes they go positive, sometimes they go negative, but this gives us a signal that changes our level of confidence in the idea that we're testing. So pivot triggers are about the future conditions that will make us want to adapt. And it's really agreeing, when should we adapt? What do we need to see to say, yep, now it's time to adapt? When do you do this? When you're talking about measuring success, for instance. But you can also do this kind of any time when you think, we seem to be going in a bad direction. And how do you do it? Instead of trying to persuade people with evidence, you say, obviously, the plan is going to work. Obviously, your idea is brilliant. But let's say we're in that weird world, that alternate world where Biff's in charge. What might we see in the future that would make us want to change our plans? And you let them throw their future self under the bus instead of trying to throw their current self under the bus, which is very hard. Once you've got that agreement, then it's much more likely that you're going to be able to change the plan later. And by communicating with a pivot trigger statement, you're letting everyone on the project and around the project know, actually, this might change. We might adapt if it's not getting us the signals that we need today, which changes the vibe of projects immeasurably. I should note, this doesn't always work. Sometimes people see the data and they go, we're doing it anyway. But at least you know what you're dealing with at that point. This another quote. One of the most useful product development tactics we used at Qubit was pivot triggers, strategic decisions with user-centric understanding. This changes the conversations that you're having with your stakeholders and your colleagues. It boils it all down. It's very, very strategic, and it makes you look like you know what you're doing, which is quite helpful. The third, maybe the most powerful, anatomy of an insight. This is about how should we adapt. So we've understood where we're most afraid. We've set pivot triggers to understand when we want to adapt. Now let's say our pivot triggers have tripped and we're like, oh dear, we need to change the plan. How are we going to do that? For example, those RSVPs from our Christmas party. Oh dear, only 5 people RSVP'd yes. We haven't met the pivot trigger. Well, obviously that means we should cancel, right? And it means we should feel nobody wants to come to our party. We are the unpopular losers. We are Billy No Mates. That's not very nice. We don't like that. And it's not that simple. We often jump to conclusions like this when we're in business. We take a piece of data and we assume a lot of stories about it. We interpret that data, tell ourselves one story, and imagine that that's all there is to it. This I break down into signals, stories, and options. We've got a signal at the bottom. That is what actually happened. There's the story that we're telling ourselves about what happened, and there's the option for what we might do about it. The trick now is to tell more stories. What's another story that might be going on? Well, maybe the date we picked for our party doesn't work. Here's the really interesting thing. Once you tell another story, you start to open up what you can perceive in the world. Now we realise, of course, 8 people already said they were going to Bob's, 6 people said they were busy that night, and Maddie said she's washing her hair that night. So maybe the date doesn't work, and that gives us another option. We could change the date. What else might be going on? Well, maybe it's the dress up as a pudding theme. And now because Maddie says she's washing her hair, and actually now I think about it, our friends hate dressing up. Well, this gives us a couple more options, doesn't it? We could change the theme, or we could change the friends. We can invite people who actually like dressing up as a pudding. What we're doing here is increasing the number of options for action we have from where we are today. We act, we adapt, we act, we adapt. And we evolve where we are rather than setting some future goal and hoping that we're going to get there. I love this quote from Gary Klein. An insight is an unexpected shift to a new story about what's happening in the world. And it's by encouraging our team together. This is something Louise talked about in her last talk. Collaborate with your team, have people do this together. We want to get the stories out from our team, come up with stories together, come up with ideas for what we're going to do together. It's much more likely that people are going to take it on board that way. We're creating more options for how to adapt. When do you do this? When you're stuck debating about 1 or 2 ideas. So often you've got just one idea. I've used this often when coaching teams. There's this one idea and it's too big and it's not going to work. But I'm not going to debate you. We're just going to tell, well, what's the data that you're seeing that tells you that that's a good idea? And what's the story that you're telling that tells you that that's the right option? Now let's tell more stories about what might be going on. Oh, and we see more data. Oh, and we create more options. And suddenly it frees us up. Even worse, 2 ideas. Are we going with Dave's idea or Sally's idea? Let's A/B test it. No, don't do that. You're ignoring everything else that's not Dave's or Sally's idea, which is almost certainly a better idea. So instead, tell more stories. How do you do this? You just do it. You ask people to say, well, what is the story you're telling yourself that says why that? Okay, what's another thing that might be going on? What's another thing that might be going on? I just start doing this in a document and it happens. This is what one of my coaching clients said. Signal, stories, options enabled us to hold multiple interpretations without having to have one truth and enabled the team to feel part of the process. The dirty little secrets. Often we say research will tell you why something is happening. Actually, it won't. We can't know why something is happening. Reality is too complicated. There's too much of it. There are many, many reasons why anything is happening. And when we come up with the one reason why we think it's happening, we're probably telling ourselves a simple story. Let's tell multiple stories. What matters in the end is that we're going to take different action that creates different results. So there we are. We're going to act and adapt. And here's a bonus wrongness. This goes back to the theme from the start. We often feel like we need to align on the vision before we start. We need to know where we're going, don't we, before we can take the first step. Actually, no, that traps us. Instead, I realized that alignment comes after success. It's once we're looking back after Christmas that we know whether it was good or bad. It's when we look back from having sent that spreadsheet that we know, wow, people are really keen on this, we should invest more. It's when we look back from that failed car loans thing that we realise, oh yes, of course, we should have known better. We couldn't have aligned on that beforehand. So make a plan, sure, but agree when you're going to tear up that plan or set fire to it, as they're doing there, a bit more violent. Okay, so innovation tactics, quick plug. You can get your copy at pipdex.com. This is packed with 54 methods like the ones you've just seen. Or if you want these methods right now, snap that or go to that little address, bit.ly/a-adapt, and you'll grab the instructions for these 3 methods and one more, which is even more powerful but takes too long to explain in a talk. So you can grab those right now. And with that, I will say thank you very much.
Loved it. Loved everything about that, and fantastic speaker as well.
Well, thank you very much.
A few questions for you here. How do you set the pivot trigger number? Why would it be 6 out of 10 rather than 4 out of 10? Good.
That's a really good question. And that is in a, how do you set it? You set it in discussion. So once you've understood, once you've aligned your team, this is about alignment now, you've aligned your team that we're worried about that party, we're worried about, or in that case, that was for the Calendly thing, wasn't it? So we're worried that maybe people won't want this integration, which would mean that we wasted our time. But we're really confident. We think this is going to be really powerful. So we reckon 6 out of 10 will be up for it. That's one angle. We're setting our expectation so that our expectation can be shattered once we actually get the data back. We're also doing some back of the napkin maths and saying, well, if we were to do this at scale, we're going to need around 60% of customers to be taking this up. Otherwise, it's not going to be worth it for us. Now, is this going to be statistically significant, to take on another theme from Louise's talk just before? No, it's not. But that's fine, because you're going to keep doing this in cycles. If we'd got back 6 out of 10 people who wanted to use Calendly, we wouldn't have then gone, great, heads down, let's build it for 10 months, and we're all sorted. We would have moved to the next thing we're afraid about, and we'd have set another round of pivot triggers, and we'd have set another number, perhaps an even more aggressive number, and figured out whether we could meet that as well. We might have found out, well, they've installed the integration, but now we need to know, are they actually using it? And if they're using it, are they then getting the value from it? Do we end up seeing that people who use it actually do shorten the time it takes them to get an interview with someone, for instance? So it's a cyclical thing. You act and adapt and act and adapt. It's loopishness.
So I've got another couple of questions here, another few questions actually, and they all kind of fall under the same theme.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and pull them into one.
Love
so
it.
Apologies if I don't do that very well. The concept's brilliant, but a lot of the time we need to try and convince other people to buy into that concept.
Yep.
How do we go about, in the organisations, especially where UX and design normally sit within those organisations, how do we go about making that change? How do we push that change internally?
Great. Fantastic question. The answer is stop trying to persuade people, stop trying to evangelise. These are all methods that you can just do. So you can just, the fourth one that's in the link that I just shared is one called multiverse mapping. I often do that just by myself while I'm in a meeting with people talking about stuff. I'll just start making a map. And then at some point I'll just show it and go, I think this is what we're talking about. You don't need to convene a meeting or persuade anyone that this is how you're going to do things. You don't need to persuade anyone to start using pivot triggers. You can just go and say, hey, look, I think we're worried about this particular aspect of the project. So I think we should send an email to 10 customers and see, do enough of them reply to say that they're interested in this? And I think we need 6 out of 10 to say yes for it to be worth it for us to carry on. What do you think, stakeholder? And you get 3 sorts of responses to this. One is, oh yeah, great. Yeah, no, I think that's right. Of course, that makes sense. They're really delighted that you're thinking that strategically and that you're considering their risks, the things that they're worried about as well. Or you hear 6 out of 10 isn't enough. We're going to need 8 out of 10. Or no, that's too many. We only need 2 out of 10 to make this work. I've run the numbers. Now you're having a conversation at a strategic level. Or they say, nope, not interested. We have to do this anyway. I've promised it to somebody. It doesn't matter if nobody uses it ever, you've just got to build it. At least you now know. but you're having a different sort of a conversation, not the same old conversation where you're saying, what are the objectives, please? What are the KPIs, please? And people are going, back in Figma, make some screens to the developers.
Yeah, so you're changing the communication, basically.
Yeah, as Don Draper said, if you don't like if you don't like what people are saying, change the conversation.
Awesome. Brilliant.
Not that he's a role model.
On that note, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you very much.